There we go.
Okay, so the South Africans are not very happy with what they see, how the Portuguese are conducting themselves on military missions, and they feel that maybe it's not a good idea to actually be working with these people. There you can quickly see the route that this very first air mission into Angola takes place. It goes from Rundu to Rinkwa, and then they they return rather all the way back to Katimu Malilu. Reports dealing with the current SADF support in support of the Portuguese. You can see that by 1967, over 2,000 flights
Gone.
Hello? Are we good? Okay, can I continue?
Yeah, continue.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Okay, so the, so the helicopters are working a lot. The crews are working a lot. They're flying a lot. The transport side, the logistics side, we look and see the C-130s, they've already done 149 hours, flight hours, bringing up mostly helicopters and things like that. They fly the helicopters up in the C-130s and then they go from there. The Dakotas are doing a majority of the flying. They're over almost 500 hours. The Skymaster is almost at 100 hours. Over 430 passengers, military passengers, have been brought up to Southwest, and 450 have returned. In terms of cargo, mostly for the police, there's 70,000 pounds of groceries that have been taken up over this period. Spare parts, and also the South African commitment to the Portuguese, to the police, the South African Defence Forces commitment has been steadily growing and growing and growing as this campaign continues. We will now go to quite a unique little niche operation that is not well known within South Africa. In 1965, an American academic by the name of Amelia Catherine Lace, she publishes a little article in an academic journal about apartheid South Africa and the collective measures that the United Nations could do against South Africa, because the United Nations has been, ever since the Second World War, they have been pestering South Africa to allow Southwest Africa to become independent. The Africans are resisting this, and they are refusing to comply with the United Nations requests. Now, this paper by this academic sets out exactly the role of the United Nations and how the collective measures and what possible collective measures the United Nations could do against South Africa. And one of the measures that is mentioned in her paper is the use of military force by the United Nations against South Africa to compel them to then leave Southwest and allow independence for Southwest. It suggests these military measures as an available option amongst everybody else. And the Africans take notice of this and how popular this article is within academia within the United States, and it is a worrying factor for them. To add to their concern, in October of 1966, the UN passes a resolution where the Africa's mandate to administer the Southwest Africa is revoked, so that it's now declared that Africa's occupation of Southwest Africa is an illegal occupation, and it is no longer sanctioned by the United Nations. So Africa is in breach of United Nations law, and they should immediately withdraw all their forces from Southwest Africa and allow for independence to take place. Obviously, the South Africans see it a completely different light. So Africa would like to incorporate Southwest as a fifth province into the Republic, and that is what they're hoping for, but they have virtually no support in the international community at all with this idea of them. The following year, electronic warfare teams at the Director of Military Intelligence intercept several communications that are emanating from the United Nations and US sources, indicating that what Amelia Weiss suggested, that they are seriously considering launching a military assault on Southwest Africa, an invasion by United Nations forces against the Southwest African military target. In October, because of this interceptions that the signalers are picking up, there's a conference held at South African Air Force headquarters. And if you look and see the documentation coming out of that, the reasons that the Africans think the United Nations would be considering launching a military assault against Africa are as follows. Firstly, the ineffective actions by the United Nations General Assembly. Since the establishment of the United Nations General Assembly, where all the nations are represented, various countries, mostly and predominantly from India, who became independent in 1948, have been vocally attacking South Africa at every opportunity that they get about its racial policy, the policy of apartheid, and the occupation of Southwest Africa. And despite all these verbal assaults in the General Assembly from various countries, specifically out of the Africa bloc and out of the Asia bloc, the South Africans are refusing to comply. They're refusing to budge. They are basically ignoring the United Nations and saying, we will continue to do in Southwest as we feel fit. So the first is the total ineffective actions by the United Nations General Assembly. The second is the failure of the military campaign launched by SWA. SWA has been trained in Tanzania by Soviet instructors, but they have achieved very little in the year that they've actually been on campaign. Most of their soldiers travel from Tanzania by road through Zambia, and then will have to climb off their trucks in Zambia, and then they have to walk into southeastern Angola and walk all the way through southeastern Angola to be able to infiltrate into Movamboland. The other option is to infiltrate south into Botswana and then try and cross over that border. Both ways have their own dangers. It is far, it is long. You can only really do it in the wet season if you want to have access to water. So it is quite a tough ask from a SWA perspective to actually reach that area that they want to dominate, which is Movamboland. It's far away, and there are very minimal, but there are Portuguese patrols from time to time that they must keep note of and keep track of. So these two reasons, the Africans' demise, could be why the United Nations is now considering launching a military assault against South Africa. So Air Force headquarters says, well, we have to do a couple of things to be able to counter this. Firstly, all movement towards Southwest Africa should be identified and analyzed. Secondly, the Alouette 3 helicopters and the Cessna 185s that are already deployed into the area, those airfields must be protected at all costs, that they are not subject to a sneaky attack or anything like that. And lastly, the Cessna 185 that are currently deployed within Southwest Africa are still in their civilian markings. These aircraft must be immediately converted via a South African Air Force little maintenance team to camouflage. They must get a camouflage scheme to be able to better operate on operational levels without having to worry about like the civilian camouflage scheme.
2 minutes.
100%. On the 5th of December, another little piece of this puzzle comes together. A clandestine CIA source walks into the South African embassy in Washington, D.C. And this source tells South African officials within Washington of a very elaborate plan that is being set up to take over Southwest Africa by an air assault operation. And according to the source, this will be launched by an African task force, and its main aim is to take control of a key airfield in Southwest Africa. The source says that the grouping that is preparing will be launched from Zambia and will use a composite African force of roughly a battalion strength, and that it will either be air launched or dropped by parachute. And the South Africans listen to the source, and obviously that information gets transferred from Washington to Pretoria, and the African military planners sit down and think, okay, if this is going to happen, then the logical day that they think the United Nations would strike would be 10 December. Well, that is the day that the UN actually celebrates Human Rights Day. So they're thinking, okay, maybe 10 December of 1967, if this is a verifiable threat, then that would be the day that the United Nations will consider launching an assault against Southwest Africa. I think we're going to break here for now because we just got a minute to go.